We are living in a time with so many uncertainties with the COVID-19 and its various mutations. The world is looking to something better, and we need to recognize the need for unity and acceptance of those around us. In the meantime, we see the world being filled with anger, depression, lawlessness, fear, and distrust of one another. To help me get through these times, my mind goes back to an inspirational story I heard years ago, and it gives me strength from day to day to accept things that come into my path and give me hope for the future. I don't know if the story was true or not, but it gives me direction to become a better person and accept those around me who may be different from me. The story went as follows. There was an elderly couple who lived in a large home located near a university in a small Midwestern town. They rented out their upstairs rooms to students and visitors who came to the university. One night, while Mrs. X was preparing supper for themselves, there was a knock at the front door. When she opened the door, she saw a sight that she didn't expect. Standing before her was a little old man with severely knurled hands, with extremely disfigured face. It was obvious that life had been very difficult and hard for him. She was startled at first, and then, in a quiet voice, the man asked if she had a bed he could sleep in for just one night. He said he had come to visit his son, who attended the university, and his bus didn't leave until the next morning. Mrs. X's first impulse, of course, was to say she had no more rooms. But as she looked at the man, she had compassion for him and offered him to sit down on the porch because she could tell he was extremely exhausted. Mrs. X finished preparing the meal and then invited the man to come in and share the meal with them. He refused, saying he was well prepared, as he brought out an old brown paper sack and started to eat his dry sandwich. After supper, Mrs. X went out and sat down on the swing with the old man and began a conversation to become better acquainted with him. The old man began telling her his story. He said, years ago, he bought a small farm and all was going well until one day they awoke to find their house was on fire. He tried desperately to save his wife and son, but was only able to get his son out of the house. As a result of the fire, his face was terribly disfigured, and there was very little that can be done about it. After the fire, his life has been a struggle, but he determined that his son would be able to get an education so he would have a better life and a future. It has become harder and harder to make ends meet on a small farm, but he wanted to see his son continue his education. He said he had been knocking on doors since noon, trying to find a place to stay for the night, but everyone turned him away. Oh, life has been so tough since the fire. The man's story touched Mrs. X's heart, and she said she had no rooms open, but she would set up a cot in her children's room for the night. He said, I could sleep right here on the swing for the night, but she insisted he sleep in the house. The next morning, Mrs. X went to check on the old man and found his blankets were neatly folded on the cot, and he was sitting on the front porch. He said, he had a good night's sleep, and the children accepted him very well. They were not concerned how he looked, as so many older people do. As he was leaving to catch his bus, he turned and timidly asked if he could stay there the next time he came to visit his son. He said he would be content to sleep on the porch and would try not to bother the family. She assured him he could stay there any time he returned. One day, a few months later, she heard a knock on the door, and there stood the old farmer, holding a box which contained vegetables from his farm. Each time he visited, he would bring them chickens and vegetables as a gift. There were times in between visits that they would receive a gift box from the old farmer. They realized, it was a sacrifice for him to give them the gifts instead of selling them at the market, and also the distance he would have to walk to town to mail them. As time passed, the visits were fewer and fewer, and finally, he never returned. The son had graduated from university, and they heard that the old farmer had passed away. A neighbor came over one day asking why she would keep providing a bed for the old man. She said, "I took one look at him and turned him away that night. When he came and knocked on the door asking for a room," Mrs. X replied, "I feel that our home had been touched by an angel each night the sweet, humble old farmer stayed in their home." She went on to say, "I look forward to when we are all gathered together in heaven, when there'll be no disharmony among us, where there'll be no pain or suffering, but love and acceptance only will prevail." Friends, this type of unity is what the world so desperately needs today. In my younger years, I remember the song, "What the world needs now is love, sweet love." We have so much to gain by sharing and accepting our differences. The story of the kind old farmer and Mrs. X is an example of this. In the scriptures, Jesus says, "Peace, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you." Oh, friends, during this time of unrest and uncertainty, I encourage you to accept the love, peace, and unity that Jesus offers us today. Remember, Jesus loves you, and He's all we need. peace and unity that Jesus offers us today. Remember, Jesus loves you, and He's all we need.